Yo, welcome back to the Crucible Brothers. My name is Lionhearts, and today we're going to be talking about why you should not be surprised that Jade Rabbit took over Trials this past weekend. Because if you understand anything about the weapon, it makes total sense. A little bit of a fun fact for you before we get started. Jade Rabbit was actually the weapon that I went flawless with for the very first time in Destiny 2, way back in the double primary meta. I ran Jade Rabbit and an Icolo sub. I remember it distinctly. It was on Distant Shore. It was a great time. That's the first time I went flawless in either Destiny 1 or 2 because I didn't play much Destiny 1 and I was bad at it. And in Destiny 2, I was also bad at it, but I got carried. And you know who carried me? Jade Rabbit and my friend Furley. So shout out to Furley, shout out to Jade Rabbit, and let's get into the video. Alright, let's start off with some obvious stuff out the gate. How dominant was Jade Rabbit last weekend during Trials? Well, Jade Rabbit had the highest single percentage share of kills in any trial weekend ever, except for one weekend way long ago where Fellwinters had a higher share of percentage. Courtesy of Trials Report on Twitter. That's insane. Jade Rabbit came in with 3 million individual Guardian kills this weekend. That is bananas. Which leads to the simple question of why? Well, you combine one of the longest range maps in the entire game with a recent buff to scout rifles, and bada bing, bada boom, people are going to pick it up in Trials to see how it'll do. The interesting thing about it is that Jade Rabbit stands alone as the most picked scout rifle for a very specific set of reasons, some of which I actually forgot to highlight in our recent scout rifle breakdown video about the 150 buffs, mainly because I was caught up in the hype of Transfiguration and Polaris Lance. That's kind of on me. I'm going to hold the L on that one. Jade Rabbit will always be the most picked scout rifle because of its certain set of characteristics. What it boils down to is a mixture of stats and feel. When you compare Jade Rabbit to other scout rifles in the same archetype, Jade Rabbit has by far the best in class stats by like a country mile, especially if you complete the Catalyst. The Catalyst might be one of the most important aspects of this weapon because going from 40 stability, which is already damn near best in class, to 80 is insane. The combination of 80 stability and Zen Moment makes Jade Rabbit a laser beam, and consider that stability now reduces flinch as well. That laser beam can no longer be abated. You have high caliber rounds, so it's you're flinching the opposition, and then now with the archetype buff, Fate of All Fools actually works, making Jade Rabbit a consistent 2-crit 1-body experience at basically any range. And as before, we get to Jade Rabbit's most advantageous aspect in my opinion, and that's the scope and the zoom. You see, Jade Rabbit actually owns lowest in-class zoom for 150 scout rifles, and I believe second overall lowest in the game, losing out to a few 180 scouts with 19 zoom compared to its 20. And the difference of 20 to 21 to 22 zoom is noticeable in terms of your FOV, your received flinch, and your ability to duel in the closer mid-range. It may seem like a small difference, but once you use these scout rifles enough, you notice it. It's gigantic. And then, of course, we include the scope itself. A clear, small scope that highlights enemies. That's amazing. Being able to spot invisible players, players with very dark shader setups on certain maps, Jade Rabbit just gives you that ease of use of highlighting enemies at all ranges, making your job as the laning Larry even easier. Which makes Jade Rabbit overall the complete package. It oftentimes just feels like a bigger hand cannon. And in a lot of ways, that's what it is. So for all of our hand cannon players out there, when we get onto these longer range maps, we want something that still feels comfortable to us, that feels like what we're used to with our hand cannon gunplay. And Jade Rabbit is the most like a hand cannon out of all of the scout rifles in terms of overall feel. Which is why all of these factors kind of coalesce into what created the Jade Rabbit show over the weekend. But was Jade Rabbit even the best option on Eternity? Was it really as dominant as the stats played out? I think yes and no. I think there is somewhat of an implementation lag here going on, where because we haven't had a map like Eternity as the Trials map for a long time, you combine that with our recent buff to scout rifles, people were definitely exploring new options. I don't think you see as much anchoring of outside lanes on Eternity as we did this past weekend if it were to come up in the map rotation again, because towards the end of the weekend, people started to realize that, wait a minute, you don't have to contest with these people camping in the back of the map with Jade Rabbits as much. You can play towards the middle, the inside hallway area, and force those players to push towards you for heavy control and get them inside of ranges where the Jade Rabbit isn't as good. And then that opens up flank routes, it opens up the map a lot more. I do think there was a lot of people just kind of butting their heads against the Jade Rabbit users early on the first few days, and that led to a lot of perceived frustration where people were like, wow, Jade Rabbit's dominating. Is Jade Rabbit too good? Is Jade Rabbit overpowered? And obviously, none of that's true. Jade Rabbit is not overpowered whatsoever. I mean, for God's sakes, guys, Scout Rifles just got usable again. Please don't do this to me. However, a lot of people were just playing right into Jade Rabbit's wheelhouse, because I think people don't understand that laning and anchoring is a playstyle with a relatively high skill ceiling. And this may not make sense if you're used to thinking of laning as people sitting way back with Scout Rifles, missing all their shots, and then losing the fight to a sniper user. But in my mind, when I think of laning and anchoring, I take from the perspective of someone who's played Counter-Strike for so many years, where anchoring and lane control was some of the most useful skills in the entire game. So your ability to be precise, controlled, deadly at these ranges while you anchor these sightlines is key to your success in the game. So when I use Scout Rifles, I take laning very seriously, and I try to have as high of an efficacy as possible when I control my angles, because I am the map control for my team. If I can't hold this lane, if I lose a duel to a sniper, or I lose a duel to another Scout Rifle user, I've given up an extreme amount of map control. So you got a lot of players just brainlessly pushing the Jade Rabbit users, feeding them a lot of kills. They're not trying to adapt as much. And at the end of the day, as strong as lane control with Scout Rifles can be, their number one enemy is good snipers, because one shot is always faster than three. So while I would expect Jade Rabbit to dominate and be very popular anytime we have a long range map, I don't think we see this kind of polarity ever again. I think players are going to be more willing to adapt to what Jade Rabbit does so strongly and either play around it and force Jade Rabbits to adapt to them, or they're just going to start countering them harder with good sniper play. And I think that's what we kind of missed, where people were kind of getting caught up in the lane versus lane fight and trying to challenge Jade Rabbits with Jade Rabbits, which is kind of like RNG, who wins the high cal flinch wars, instead of adapting to the map that we had and forcing those lane control players out of their comfort zone. Alright, with the last little bit of this video, I want to talk a little bit about Jade Rabbit loadouts a little bit more, as I kind of want to talk about Scout Rifle loadouts in general, and maybe this is a topic we'll expand on in another video. But don't sleep on double primary. I know we get caught up a lot in the strength of fusion rifles, shotguns, glaives, all that kind of stuff, but really, I find that Scout Rifles pair perfectly with other primary weapons, especially like sidearms, SMGs. Like, they just work. The combination, like I said, of Jade Rabbit and Icolo sub feels incredible. It felt incredible back in the old double primary only system, and now it's like, dude, Icolo sub with the correct roll is so deadly. It just shreds everything in that close range. You can keep those shotgunners at arm's length if you know what you're doing. You keep your map awareness up, and it just makes you feel so good at taking confident 1v1s. It makes you feel like a dueling monster because you're not reliant on overly crutching on positions, playing corners, baiting shotgun shots or fusion shots. It's like, no, I'm just going to get into this mid-range after I pick you up with my Scout Rifle. I'm going to get right up in your buddy's face with the sub and not allow him to get any positional advantage. And like, he's not going to beat me with his hand cannon. He's not going to beat me with his pulse rifle or auto rifle because I have the advantage with the submachine gun in this fight. They just synergize so nicely and cover each other's weaknesses beautifully. And it's just a loadout that just feels very good to make optimal. Because it's not like, obviously special weapons are better. Don't get me wrong, on the whole, special weapons are stronger than double primary. But double primary makes you feel very dependent on how good of a player you are. And when you succeed with double primary and your aim is feeling crisp, it is just an unreal satisfying feeling. And honestly, I would recommend it for players who are trying to get better at the game because it helps you get rid of certain crutches. It helps you to not rely on quick draw shotguns or fast swap shotguns or fusion rifle quarter baiting and pre-charging, or relying on like glaive blocks or snipers not having a whole lot of flinch. Like, a lot of those special weapon playstyles have a lot of easy outs, whereas when you run double primary, you're only as good as you are in terms of your aim, your positioning, and your map awareness, because everyone else is abusing those super strong aspects themselves. So yeah, I would highly recommend it. Make sure you guys give it a try. And that is going to be the end of this video. Kind of a short one today. We're working on a lot of other projects right now for the channel that are taking up some time. So I thought I'd do a quick little one, talk about Trials, talk about meta. If you guys played Trials over the weekend, how'd you enjoy it? Did you use Jade Rabbit or were you using something else? Obviously, No Time to Explain was still very popular, but you know, some things never change. Make sure you guys take a second, like the video, leave a comment for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel for more, and we will see you in the next video. May Jade Rabbit live on forever.